Imagine boarding your first solo flight in the plush quiet of first class. Excitement dancing in your chest, and then feeling every eye in the cabin silently question your right to be there. 15-year-old Sierra Langston thought this journey would be her moment of freedom and growth. Instead, she encountered suspicion, cold exclusion, and whispered remarks about unaccompanied minors and diversity quotas. What happens when a teenager's dignity is traded for protocol? And what unfolds when the very person who wields the ultimate power, the owner of the airline, steps onto the plane as a father determined to protect his child? How far would you go to reclaim your voice in a world that wants you to stay small? Join us as we follow Sierra's unforgettable flight from humiliation to empowerment, and discover how one girl's courage sparked an industry-wide reckoning. If you're ready to witness justice served at 30,000 feet, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe now so you won't miss a single moment of this incredible story. The morning air in Houston was already heavy with heat, but inside the Langston home, the temperature was a mix of nerves, excitement, and an unspoken ache. Sierra Langston, 15, stood in front of her open suitcase for the 5th time that hour. Every item inside was perfectly folded, labeled, and rechecked, but she kept finding reasons to repack. Her travel outfit was simple, but stylish. A soft gray sweater, black jeans, her favorite white sneakers, and a braided gold bracelet that had once belonged to her mother. Sierra looked at herself in the mirror, adjusting the strap of her backpack with careful precision. She wasn't just flying to Seattle to visit her aunt. This was about something else, something bigger. This was her first solo flight, her first taste of independence, her father's trust, her mother's legacy, and a chance, just maybe, to prove she belonged in the spaces people rarely expected girls like her to be. I triple-checked the boarding pass. Dad, she called out. No answer. She smirked, knowing where he'd be. Sure enough, when she stepped out of her room and walked into the sunlit hallway, she found him standing in the kitchen, staring into a half-empty cup of coffee, lost in thought. Nathaniel Langston was tall, sharply dressed even at breakfast, with a calm presence that filled the room before he even spoke. CEO of Orion Air, owner of one of the fastest-growing airlines in North America. But this morning, he wasn't a mogul. He was just a dad trying to hide how much he was going to miss his daughter. "You've checked the weather report?" he asked, turning to her. "Clear skies from here to Seattle." "I even checked for turbulence updates," Sierra replied, raising an eyebrow. Nathaniel smiled. "You're ready?" he said. She tilted her head. "You sure you're not going to secretly follow the plane in a jet just to make sure I get there safe?" He didn't answer. "Wait," she gasped. "You are, aren't you?" Nathaniel gave a little shrug. "Just flying out a few hours after you. Business meeting with an investor. Total coincidence." She rolled her eyes, but there was something comforting about it. She wouldn't admit it, but part of her was glad he wouldn't be too far behind. "Dad, I've got this," she said, walking over to zip her suitcase. "You raised me to be strong. Remember, calm, dignified, and not afraid to take up space." He came over and placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "I know," he said quietly, "but knowing doesn't make it easier, especially when you're sending your baby into a world that doesn't always know how to see her." Sierra looked up at him. "What do we say when the world forgets who we are?" he asked. Her voice was steady. "Hold your head high. Know your worth. And never let anyone make you feel small." They said it together like a sacred prayer. After a long hug, they headed out the front door, the morning sun spilling across their driveway. A black town car waited at the curb. The driver, Marcus, greeted them with a nod. Nathaniel loaded the suitcase himself, like he always did. As the car pulled away, Sierra leaned her head back and watched the city blur past. Her fingers fiddled with the bracelet around her wrist. Mom would be proud. Right, she asked softly. Nathaniel looked over at her, surprised by the question. Then he nodded, eyes misting just slightly. She'd be so proud, sweetheart. But more importantly, you should be proud of you. At Houston International Airport. Sierra followed all her father's advice early arrival. Polite tone with security, ID ready, quiet confidence. Still, when she presented her first-class boarding pass to the TSA agent, the man squinted at it like it had to be wrong. "This ticket's for seat 1A, he said. "Yes, sir," Sierra replied politely. "And you're flying alone?" "Yes, sir. I'm 15. My father booked the flight. He also informed the airline." The agent hesitated. Then he flagged down another officer, who asked more questions, double-checked her ID, and finally reluctantly waved her through. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She'd been taught that silence sometimes screamed the loudest. From a discreet distance near the gate, Ray Mendoza, the Langstons' longtime security consultant, took note of everything. Dressed in jeans, a baseball cap, and glasses, he blended into the background like any other traveler, but his eyes missed nothing. Ray typed a short message on his phone. Subject Sierra, checkpoint delays. Handled herself perfectly. Proceeding to lounge. Will monitor. Sierra made her way through the terminal. Calm on the outside. Storming on the inside. Why did her name raise eyebrows? Why did her ticket seem less valid than anyone else's? As she arrived at the Orion Sky Lounge, she paused outside the glass doors. Just a room. Just chairs and coffee. And yet, it still felt like a test. The hostess smiled professionally, but hesitated when she scanned the boarding pass. "You're flying first class." "Yes, ma'am." "And traveling alone." Sierra nodded. The hostess looked uncertain, but tapped a few buttons, then finally waved her inside. "Enjoy your stay." Sierra walked into the lounge, chest lifted, but heart heavy. She found a corner seat by the window and pulled out a book she'd barely be able to focus on. Outside the lounge, Camille Hawthorne, senior flight attendant for the flight to Seattle, was just leaving the pre-flight meeting. She paused when she noticed Sierra inside the lounge. Camille frowned slightly. Young. Alone. First class. Her expression hardened. She turned to a coworker beside her. "I swear, ever since the company got bought out, these lounges are filled with charity cases and rich kids trying to play adult," she muttered. Sierra didn't hear her, but she felt it. She felt it in the weight of the eyes she couldn't see. The test had only just begun. Sierra sipped the lukewarm herbal tea the lounge server had brought her, the cup warming her palms but doing nothing to settle the churn in her stomach. She stared through the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching planes taxi slowly across the runway. Everything outside looked peaceful, but inside, her nerves hummed like static. She had read 3 paragraphs of her book without absorbing a single word. The lounge was quiet, filled with the soft rustle of newspapers and the occasional clink of a coffee cup. Yet the silence didn't comfort her. It pressed against her chest like a weight. A few minutes later, the lounge doors slid open with a soft hiss. Sierra didn't look up, not at first, but she felt it, that subtle shift in the air, that tightening. She glanced up from her book to see a tall woman with flawless posture and a steely gaze walk in. Her navy blazer was crisp, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun that didn't dare waver. She carried herself like someone who had seen too much, served too long, and believed respect had to be earned, not offered. Camille Hawthorne, lead flight attendant, 22 years of seniority, known for her efficiency, feared for her silence. Camille scanned the lounge automatically, as if counting faces. Her eyes landed on Sierra. She paused. It was only for a second, but Sierra caught it, the slight narrowing of her eyes, the flicker of surprise, maybe even annoyance. Sierra glanced away quickly, pretending to read. Camille walked past, not saying a word, but Sierra could feel the judgment trailing behind her like perfume. From across the room, Ray Mendoza sipped from a paper cup and watched. His seat gave him a clear view of both Sierra and Camille. He didn't move, didn't blink, just tapped a quiet note into his phone. Subject lounge encounter. Camille Hawthorne appears hostile. No direct interaction yet. Monitoring. Camille made her way to the far end of the lounge where a few other crew members had gathered. They greeted her with nods and quiet chatter. One of them, a younger attendant named Marla, leaned in and whispered something. Camille's eyes briefly flicked back toward Sierra. "She can't be more than 16, Camille said under her breath. "She's on the manifest," Marla replied. "First-class ticket. Traveling alone. Her name's Sierra Langston." Camille tilted her head. "Langston," she repeated. The name didn't ring a bell, but it felt important. She'd heard it recently, somewhere in corporate. Maybe a newsletter. No matter. She looked again at Sierra, who was now quietly scrolling through her phone, legs crossed, earbuds in. Something about the girl bothered her. Not just her youth, not just the seat assignment, but the way she sat in that chair, like she belonged there. Sierra glanced up again, this time catching Camille looking. Camille didn't smile. She turned back to her colleagues and whispered, "Just keep an eye. We've had incidents with kids using corporate perks. I want to make sure she's not someone's intern who wandered into the wrong section." Marla hesitated. "She has a valid boarding pass." "Camille, I'll check it myself," Camille said. Voice clipped. Back in her corner, Sierra's heart pounded, though she kept her expression calm. Her father had always taught her the importance of stillness, of not giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. But it wasn't easy. Not when eyes lingered longer than they should. Not when kindness came wrapped in suspicion. Not when the burden of proving you belonged showed up in every room you walked into. She opened a new text message to her father, but hesitated. Would telling him make her look weak? Would it worry him too much? She deleted the draft and put the phone down. She could handle this. She had to. The minutes ticked by. A soft chime announced boarding time. Sierra gathered her bag and took one last sip of tea, now gone cold. She stood, adjusted her sweater, and walked slowly toward the lounge exit. Camille saw her coming. She stepped aside, but didn't move far. As Sierra passed, Camille gave her a thin-lipped smile. "Make sure you're at the right gate, sweetheart." "First-class boards through the priority lane," she said. Sierra nodded once. "I'm aware." Their eyes met. Camille held her gaze for a moment too long, then turned away. Ray stood and followed a few paces behind Sierra, careful not to draw attention. His eyes swept over Camille. He didn't say a word, but he took note of everything. At the gate, the boarding area was beginning to fill. Families, couples, business travelers with roller bags and noise-canceling headphones. The digital screen blinked with the flight number to Seattle. Sierra stood quietly, off to the side, waiting for her group to be called. Camille arrived at the gate seconds later, rolling her crew bag behind her. She scanned the area and stopped when she saw Sierra again. Her expression was unreadable, but something hardened in her jaw. She turned to the gate agent and leaned in. "Just a heads up," Camille murmured. "There may be a minor issue with one of the first-class passengers. Young girl, solo traveler. Boarding pass might need double-checking." The gate agent looked surprised. "She's on the manifest. I just saw her lounge check-in. Everything scanned fine." Camille nodded, not convinced. "It's probably fine. Just being thorough. Back in the line." Sierra looked down at her shoes, suddenly unsure of everything. She'd done everything right, followed every step, prepared like her father had taught her. But something about the way that woman looked at her made her feel like an intruder. Not in a space, but in an idea. The idea of who gets to be first, who gets to belong. Ray typed another message. Subject escalating. Camille flagged Sierra's boarding as potential issue. No justification. We'll stay close. Sierra took a deep breath and clutched her bracelet. This was just the beginning, and she wasn't going to let them shrink her. Not today. The gate agent's voice rang out over the intercom like a school bell breaking a tense silence. First-class passengers may now board through the priority lane. Sierra Langston lifted her eyes slowly. She was already standing close to the front, clutching her passport and boarding pass. Around her, travelers in suits and high heels pulled out earbuds and gathered their belongings without hesitation. They flowed toward the boarding lane with the ease of people who never wondered whether they belonged. Sierra took a breath, a long one. She felt her fingers tighten around the thick cardstock of her boarding pass. She stepped forward, taking her place in the short line. The man ahead of her, maybe early 50s, white, wedding ring, Bluetooth earpiece still glowing, looked over his shoulder at her. Then looked again. He didn't say anything, but his brow furrowed, as if trying to figure out how someone like her had ended up in a place like this. She focused on her breath. The flight attendant standing at the boarding door greeted each first-class passenger with practiced politeness. Smiles. A few warm jokes. She complimented a woman's handbag, greeted another man by name. Then it was Sierra's turn. Camille Hawthorne's smile vanished. Her hand froze halfway to the scanner. Sierra offered her boarding pass, clearly marked with the word Seat 1A, First Class. Camille didn't take it right away. She stared. "This is first-class boarding," she said slowly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried, clear, firm, dismissive. "Yes, ma'am." "I know," Sierra said, doing her best to keep her voice even. Camille's eyes flicked down to the boarding pass, then back up to Sierra's face. She took the card and held it up, almost theatrically. "Where did you get this ticket?" she asked, as if Sierra had just handed her a counterfeit. Sierra blinked, thrown off for just a second, but she caught herself. "My father purchased it for me," she replied. Camille's expression didn't change. "And your father is Nathaniel Langston." Camille snorted softly, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "What right? And I'm Oprah." Sierra felt her cheeks flush, not from shame, but from something hotter, anger. But she swallowed it. She was not going to let this woman reduce her. "It's a valid ticket," Sierra said. Camille turned to the gate agent. "I'd like to verify this with the manifest," she said, holding up the pass as if it were suspect evidence. The gate agent looked confused. "I've already scanned it. It's fine." Camille ignored him. She turned back to Sierra. "If someone gave you this as a joke, or you found it, I just don't want you to be embarrassed when we ask you to move." Now people were watching. A couple nearby paused their conversation. A mother holding a baby shifted uncomfortably. The man with the Bluetooth turned back again. Now openly curious, Sierra could feel the stares burning into her skin. Not one voice rose in her defense. She opened her mouth to respond when someone stepped forward. A calm voice. "Excuse me," the man in the Bluetooth earpiece said. "If her boarding pass scans, what's the problem?" Camille turned, smile brittle. "Sir, we have protocols. There seems to be an irregularity." What kind of irregularity, he pressed. Camille hesitated. "She's traveling alone. Unaccompanied minor in first class isn't standard." The gate agent stepped in again. "It's already logged. She has clearance. You can scan it again if you want, but everything checks out." Sierra handed her passport and ID, which Camille inspected like they were fake Langston. She murmured, almost to herself. The name tickled something in her memory, but the picture still hadn't clicked. She finally scanned the pass. A soft beep, green light, seat 1A. Camille's jaw tightened. "Fine," she said, almost under her breath. "But if there's any issue once we're on board, you'll be removed." "Understood." Sierra nodded silently, then moved forward toward the jetway. Ray Mendoza stood 10 feet behind, watching it all unfold. He took a slow breath and typed a message. Boarding confrontation escalated. Camille delayed and challenged pass. Sierra composed. "We'll trail her onto aircraft." Sierra walked the jet bridge like it was a tightrope, not looking left or right, not letting her shoulders drop. She wouldn't give them that inside the aircraft. The plush carpet and soft lighting of the first-class cabin greeted her like another test. She reached her seat 1A by the window. She placed her carry-on above, fastened her seatbelt, and sat very still. Her hands were trembling. "Are you okay, dear?" The voice came from beside her. An older woman in her 70s. White hair, sensible shoes, clear eyes. She looked concerned, not nosy. Sierra nodded. "I'm fine. Thank you." "I'm Lucille," the woman said, holding out her hand gently. "Sierra." They smiled, a soft thread of human warmth. But just as Sierra began to relax, Camille appeared again. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clipped. "I need to see your boarding pass again." Sierra looked up, confused. "You already scanned it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Airline policy?" Camille snapped. "All first-class passengers must be verified twice." Lucille frowned. "I've been flying first class for 35 years. That's never been a rule." Camille ignored her, snatching the boarding pass from Sierra's hand. She stared at the name Langston. "Like the city or the street?" she asked with a smirk. "Like my father," Sierra said, finally reaching for her phone. "Who I'm calling right now." Camille gave a dry laugh. "Go ahead. Call whoever gave you this ticket. Meanwhile, I'll check if there's been some mistake with our diversity upgrade program. Sometimes the company gets a little too enthusiastic about quotas." The silence that followed was instant and sharp. Like air being sucked from the cabin, Lucille's mouth fell open. The Bluetooth man 2 rows behind leaned forward, stunned. Even the gate agent, still closing overhead bins, froze for a beat. Ray Mendoza typed one word into a phone. "Unacceptable." Sierra sat frozen by the window, her seatbelt already fastened, though the plane had not yet begun to taxi. The sunlight streaming through the tiny oval cast patterns on her arm. She traced them with her finger, willing herself to calm down. But her heart kept pounding. The humiliation from the boarding gate echoed in her mind. She was supposed to feel proud. She was supposed to feel free. Lucille Brenner turned gently in her seat, watching Sierra from behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her presence was quiet, kind, a silent anchor in a sea of invisible threats. "Breathe, sweetheart," Lucille whispered. "You're here. You're safe." Sierra nodded, but her mind was miles away. In her head, old voices surfaced, memories of her mother's pep talks before school competitions and her father's lessons on dignity. She tried to replay them, but Camille's words from moments before kept pushing through. "Mistake with our diversity upgrade program. Quotas." A deep ache pulsed in Sierra's chest. How many times had she watched her father move through rooms like this, always standing tall, never giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing him rattled, never explaining or apologizing for his place at the table. She tried to channel him now. She looked out the window as the plane filled with passengers, some in business attire, some in leisure wear, all carrying an easy sense of belonging that Sierra felt herself shrinking away from. Camille made her way up and down the aisle, greeting each passenger in first class with warm smiles and efficient grace. A couple in row 2 received a pair of drinks before the plane even left the ground. A businessman was addressed by name. Sierra watched as Camille offered a menu to an older man across the aisle, his gray suit crisp, his voice booming with laughter. But when Camille reached Sierra's row, she paused. She offered Lucille a hot towel, a bottle of water, and a glossy menu. She didn't even glance at Sierra. The tray in her hand hovered for a moment before she placed it down, just short of Sierra's fingertips. Lucille watched this, her lips tightening. She handed Sierra the menu with a little nod, as if to say, "This is for you, too." Sierra took it with a quiet, "Thank you." Her hands trembled as she opened it. She tried to focus on the choices: grilled salmon, pasta primavera, beef filet, but the words on the page blurred. A lump built in her throat. Lucille's hand reached across the armrest, warm and steady. "Don't let her make you feel small," she murmured, so low only Sierra could hear. "You belong here. Anyone who thinks otherwise doesn't understand what real worth is." The seat in front of Sierra reclined, sending a puff of lavender-scented air her way. The businessman across the aisle glanced over, his gaze lingering. His eyes held no malice, but a sort of detached curiosity. Sierra felt herself being watched, judged, measured. But she forced herself to lift her chin. A flight attendant named Marla, young and nervous, appeared at Camille's side. Marla's eyes darted between Sierra and Lucille. "Would you like something to drink?" "Ma'am," she asked Lucille. Lucille replied, "And the young lady here would like an orange juice. Please." Marla smiled shyly. "Of course. I'll bring that right away." She disappeared into the galley. Camille shot Marla a look that could curdle milk. Sierra caught it, her stomach twisting. She felt a deep urge to disappear, to shrink herself into the seam of the seat. But then Lucille patted her hand, grounding her. From his place several rows behind, Ray Mendoza kept a steady gaze on the unfolding scene. He'd witnessed this sort of thing before: soft discrimination wrapped in silk, unkindness disguised as professionalism. He opened a new message to Nathaniel Langston, subject: continuing issues. Camille skipping Sierra in service, Lucille intervening. No confrontation yet, but pattern is clear. He hit send. As the captain's voice came on, welcoming passengers and explaining the flight time to Seattle, Sierra shut her eyes. She listened to the words, but only heard the sound of her own breathing. This was supposed to be her moment of freedom, her test run for adulthood. Instead, she felt like a child all over again, pressed beneath the weight of suspicion. The man with the Bluetooth from the gate now sat across the aisle, eyes fixed on his phone. But every so often, He glanced over, his brows drawn together. He seemed uncomfortable, but said nothing. The doors closed. The cabin lights dimmed. The world outside the windows began to move, and the plane eased back from the gate. Sierra tried to slow her heart. She reminded herself she was here for a reason. She reminded herself of the family she came from, of her mother's quiet courage and her father's unyielding belief in her strength. Camille began her safety demonstration, her voice smooth, her smile fixed. She moved up and down the aisle, but she never looked Sierra in the eye. It was as if Sierra didn't exist. Lucille's voice was a soft thread in the darkness. You know, I taught history for 40 years. Saw a lot of change in this country, but sometimes I wonder how much further we have to go. Don't ever think your presence here is a mistake. Some doors only open because someone like you has the courage to walk through first. Sierra looked at her, surprised by the fierce support in Lucille's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. The flight attendants finished their checks. The cabin grew still as the engines roared to life. As the plane soared into the morning sky, Sierra pressed her forehead to the window. The city fell away beneath her, sprawling out in a mosaic of highways and hope. She imagined her father's voice. Hold your head high. Know your worth. Never let anyone make you feel small. She clung to those words. She would need them, she realized, for every mile of this flight. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Camille and Marla returned to the aisle with carts. This time, Marla approached first, smiling tentatively. Orange juice for you. Miss Sierra accepted it with a small nod, grateful for the simple kindness. Camille, following behind, set down a tray in front of Lucille, then skipped Sierra again for meal orders. Lucille spoke up, her voice firmer this time. Excuse me, this young lady would like a meal, as well. Camille's smile never faltered, but her eyes narrowed. We have limited meals today. I'll see what's left. Sierra stared out the window, the land below slowly changing from city to endless green. Her heart ached, but a small spark of pride flickered. She wouldn't let them erase her. Not here, not now. The wall of ice between her and Camille felt solid. But somewhere inside, Sierra was already learning how to melt it, not with anger, but with dignity that could not be ignored. The seatbelt sign had just faded, replaced by the hush of engines and the first shuffling of magazines. Sierra closed her eyes, breathing in the faint scent of citrus from her untouched orange juice. She tried to collect herself, to remember all the reasons she deserved to be here, but every minute felt like another silent test. Across the aisle, Lucille Brenner watched Camille's every move, lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. She'd seen injustice take many forms in her life. She recognized it in the smallest gestures, averted eyes, a forced smile, a cold shoulder, and now she was watching it unfold against the girl sitting quietly beside her. Camille made her way back through first class, her smile lighting up for an older couple seated behind Sierra. Would you care for anything? To drink orange juice? Perhaps her voice was light, friendly, full of a warmth that hadn't touched Sierra since boarding. Sierra froze. She looked at her own cup, still 3/4 full, the condensation slipping down the side. Lucille leaned into the aisle. Excuse me, I believe you just told us there was no orange juice left in this section. Camille turned slowly, her face unreadable. We had a restock from the galley. Ma'am, she said, brushing off Lucille's concern with the smallest flick of her wrist. But Lucille would not let it go. Interesting timing, she replied, her voice edged with steel. Sierra wanted to disappear, to fade into the seat, to pretend none of it was happening. But she didn't. Instead, she set her orange juice down carefully, her hands steady, and stared at the small bubble of sunlight reflecting in her cup. She would not cry. Not here. From behind, a quiet voice broke the tension. "You're handling this better than most adults would," murmured a man in business casual, leaning slightly forward in his seat. He was in his 30s, with close-cropped hair and a soft accent Sierra couldn't place. His words were low enough for only Sierra and Lucille to hear. Sierra gave a small nod of thanks. The acknowledgement felt like a hand on her back, invisible but grounding. At that moment, a young man several rows back raised his phone, angling it toward the scene. Julian Reyes, a venture capitalist known in tech circles for investing in promising young founders, had noticed the cold drama unfolding between Sierra and Camille. He'd seen these stories explode online, change companies, ignite movements. He started recording, discreet but deliberate. He caught the exchange about the orange juice. He caught the way Camille's face changed when Lucille called her out, the way Sierra held herself perfectly still. Julian was no stranger to being the only one in a room who looked like him. He recognized something in Sierra's eyes, a flicker of pain mixed with unyielding pride. He decided, right then, that he would not stay silent. Back in the aisle, Marla returned with a tray. "Lunch, miss?" she asked Sierra, her tone gentle. "We have grilled salmon or pasta primavera." "Salmon, please," Sierra replied softly. Camille, returning to the front, looked over her shoulder and saw Marla serving Sierra. She hesitated, then turned sharply into the galley. For a brief moment, Marla looked nervous, but continued, setting Sierra's tray down with a smile. "If you need anything else, just ask," she whispered. Sierra unfolded her napkin, laying it across her lap with care. The meal smelled wonderful, but her appetite was gone. She took a small bite, more out of politeness than hunger. Lucille watched her, a worried frown creasing her brow. "Eat, darling," she said softly. "Strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it's just getting through the meal." Sierra managed a grateful smile and took another bite. The hum of conversation in first class was subdued. Yet Sierra could feel eyes on her, curious, sympathetic, or simply cautious, not wanting to get involved. She wished she could reach out to her father, to tell him how hard she was trying to stay composed, but she would not give Camille the satisfaction of seeing her reach for help. The man with the Bluetooth earpiece, now reading a newspaper, looked up from time to time. His jaw clenched, his fingers tightening on the paper, but he said nothing. Ray Mendoza, seated just out of sight, noted every detail. He messaged Nathaniel Langston again. Subject targeted exclusion continuing. Julian Reyes recording. Sierra showing strength but under stress. Recommend escalation if pattern persists. He did not expect a reply immediately. He knew Nathaniel was in a boardroom somewhere, but he also knew a storm was gathering. This was not the first time he'd had to witness something like this, but it felt heavier, more personal, like the weight of every time he'd been told to wait, to be silent, to let things slide. A patch of turbulence rattled the glasses on the tray tables. Passengers gasped, a few clutching their armrests. Camille appeared instantly, kneeling by the older couple, her voice smooth and comforting. She moved to a family further back, offering extra napkins and a warm smile. She walked right past Sierra and Lucille, not even glancing in their direction. When Sierra's water tipped and dribbled onto her meal tray, she was left to clean it herself, her fingers shaking, Lucille passed her extra napkins with a nod of solidarity. "That's enough," Lucille muttered. Louder now. Her patience gone. "You'd think we were invisible," Sierra swallowed, feeling the tightness in her throat, the ache behind her eyes. But then she remembered her father's voice, deep and unyielding. "Never let anyone make you feel small." She straightened in her seat. She dabbed at her tray, set her napkin neatly to the side, and lifted her chin. Julian caught her eye, offering a subtle nod of encouragement. She nodded back, just barely, and found herself breathing easier, somewhere over the heartland, as the clouds rolled past outside her window. Sierra made a silent promise. She would not let this flight change how she saw herself. If anything, it would only deepen her resolve. Every act of exclusion, every petty slight, was an orange juice. She would remember them not as reasons to give up, but as proof she had always belonged. The meal service finished with little fanfare. Sierra forced herself to finish half her salmon, not out of hunger, but from the small, stubborn hope that if she acted as though everything was normal, maybe she could make it so. She looked out the window at the endless blue, clouds tumbling below like a soft carpet she couldn't quite touch. Lucille patted her arm with a grandmother's certainty. "You did well, Sierra. You handled that with grace." Her words held weight, as if she were blessing Sierra for her patience. But inside, Sierra's resolve felt as fragile as spun glass. The longer she sat in that seat, the more her mind spun through questions she couldn't quiet. What had she done wrong? Why did every kindness toward her feel conditional? Every smile offered only to others? She pressed her lips together, holding back tears. No one was going to see her cry, not here, not on this flight. Camille's voice came through the intercom, practiced and bright. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated as we may experience some turbulence. Our crew will be with you shortly." A jolt ran through the aircraft, gentle at first, then sharper. Trays rattled. Passengers tightened their seatbelts. Camille hurried down the aisle, checking overhead bins, offering reassuring words, always stopping for the white passengers, smiling, joking, touching an arm or a shoulder. When she passed Sierra and Lucille, she looked straight ahead, never acknowledging them. Sierra's water glass skidded and tipped. She fumbled to grab it, but it spilled across her tray, soaking her napkin and bread. Camille breezed by, not even pausing. Lucille shook her head and handed over her own napkin, eyes flashing with anger. "Some people," Lucille muttered, "forget what service is supposed to mean." Sierra tried to smile. She picked up her phone, hands trembling. She wanted to text her father, to tell him she was trying her best, but she worried it would make her seem weak. Instead, she typed out a message and left it unsent. "I'm doing everything you taught me. Dad, I'm holding my head high. I wish you were here." Ray Mendoza, watching from his seat, made another note on his phone. His jaw tightened as he observed Camille skipping Sierra again. He watched Julian Reyes across the aisle, quietly filming. Ray knew these moments sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes everything changed. A new voice, a man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair, leaned forward from behind. "Excuse me, is everything all right here?" His tone was gentle, but firm. Lucille turned and gave a small, tired smile. "Nothing we can't handle. Thank you." The man nodded, but his concern lingered. More eyes in the cabin turned, curiosity stirring into discomfort. As the turbulence faded, Camille returned to the front of the cabin. She laughed with the white couple, shared a story with a businessman, and never once glanced back at Sierra. Marla, carrying an empty tray, paused near Sierra's seat. "Is everything okay?" Miss, her voice was soft. A whisper meant only for Sierra. Sierra nodded quickly, grateful but unwilling to burden Marla. "I'm fine. Thank you for asking." Marla hesitated, then gave a small, reassuring smile. "You're doing great," she said, before moving on. The plane steadied. Conversation resumed. But the mood in first class had changed. People seemed to be speaking in softer voices, glancing more often at Sierra, at Camille, at Lucille's narrowed eyes. Julian Ray's, sensing a story unfolding, continued to record short clips, capturing the uncomfortable tension. Sierra closed her eyes for a moment, taking a slow breath. She tried to remember her father's words. Dignity isn't a performance. It's your birthright. But in this moment, all she felt was the constant weight of needing to prove herself. Why do I have to work so hard to belong? Why do I need to earn every inch of kindness, she wondered, pressing her fingertips together in her lap. I'm not weak. But how many humiliations does it take to matter? Lucille must have sensed the struggle. She leaned in and whispered, "When you're the first through the door, sometimes you have to carry the weight for all those who come after. It isn't fair, but it's real. Don't let her. Don't let anyone dim your light." The seatbelt sign chimed again. The captain's voice returned, steady and calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are expecting clear air the rest of the way. Please enjoy the remainder of your flight." The energy in the cabin shifted. Passengers unbuckled, stretched, reached for books or screens. But Sierra stayed very still, bracing herself. She watched as Camille prepared more drinks for others, laughed at someone's joke, then finally returned to her seat in the galley. Ray Mendoza watched the whole exchange, debating whether to step in. He could reveal himself, pull rank, force a confrontation. But Nathaniel's last message was clear: wait, monitor, and only intervene if Sierra's safety was at risk. He sent a brief update. Subject Sierra holding up, exclusion pattern ongoing, no escalation yet, prepared to act if necessary. On the other side of the city, Nathaniel Langston's phone vibrated in the boardroom. He excused himself from a heated negotiation, stepping out into the corridor. He read Ray's message. His jaw tightening, he checked the clock. If he left now, he could intercept the flight in Denver, the next major stop. He texted Ray back, "Hold your position. If anything changes, alert me at once. I'll be there before they land." Sierra scrolled through messages from friends, trying to distract herself. A group chat buzzed with vacation photos, stories of pool parties and road trips. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. No one here knew what she was facing in first class. She put her phone away, feeling the tears threaten, but blinked them back. She would not break. Not now. Lucille squeezed her hand again, warmth in the gesture. "Don't let them steal your joy," she said softly. "You have a right to every good thing that comes your way." Sierra let herself relax into the kindness for a moment. She watched as the clouds drifted by, the sun sliding across the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, she knew her father was coming for her. That knowledge brought a small comfort, a tiny beacon of hope in a sky that suddenly felt a little less empty. And as the plane sped toward its next destination, Sierra made another silent promise. She would finish this flight, and she would do so with her dignity intact. She owed herself that much. Sierra drifted in and out of anxious daydreams as the flight moved forward. She'd lost all sense of time, the pressure in her chest building with each mile. She tried to read, to listen to music, but nothing could drown out the feeling of being watched and measured. The service had finished. The lights in the cabin were low, and Camille sat near the galley, flipping through a magazine as if nothing unusual had happened. But every so often, she looked up and glanced in Sierra's direction with a slight frown. Lucille dozed beside her, head nodding gently. Julian Reyes was typing on his laptop, glancing between the aisle and his screen, always alert. Ray Mendoza never let Sierra slip from his sight. If she'd noticed how he lingered, she would have felt safer. But Sierra was alone with her thoughts. Suddenly, the intercom clicked on, and the captain's voice, calm and measured, came over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've received new instructions from Orion Air Operations. Due to a scheduled crew change, we'll be making an unscheduled stop in Denver. We expect to be on the ground for approximately 20 minutes before continuing to Seattle." A ripple of surprise ran through the cabin. Crew change passengers whispered and exchanged confused glances. Crew changes almost never happened mid-flight, not without advance notice. Camille's brow furrowed as she stood and walked briskly up to the cockpit, her posture tense. "Denver," she asked the co-pilot in a low voice. "That wasn't on the schedule." The co-pilot shrugged, not looking up from his instruments. Operations called it in directly. VIP boarding. Orders from the top. Camille stiffened, a subtle irritation coloring her voice. "Who is this VIP?" He shrugged again. "Didn't say. But I'd make sure everything is perfect for the next 20 minutes. Camille returned to the cabin with a stiff smile, but her mind was racing. She busied herself straightening trays, tucking stray blankets, and inspecting every detail of her uniform. As the descent began, the cabin lights brightened. Lucille stirred awake, blinking as she realized the plane was landing again. "Denver, I thought we were going straight to Seattle," she said. Confused, Sierra shrugged. "I don't know. They just announced it." Lucille looked uneasy, but squeezed Sierra's hand. "We'll be on our way soon enough." "I'm sure." As the wheels touched down, the tension in the cabin sharpened. Camille made the usual announcements, her voice a little too sweet, the words a little too clipped. Ray Mendoza slipped quietly from his seat as soon as the plane stopped at the gate. He positioned himself by the front galley, scanning the jetway. He'd received the latest text from Nathaniel, just before landing. "I'm boarding in Denver. Stay close to Sierra." Ray's heart pounded. He'd worked with the Langston family for years, but had rarely seen Nathaniel move with such urgency. Outside, the jet bridge connected, and the forward cabin door swung open. A flurry of crisp uniforms appeared: 2 ground crew, a manager, and a tall, sharply dressed man with dark skin and unmistakable presence. Nathaniel Langston stepped onto the plane, his eyes sweeping the cabin with quiet command. He wore a tailored navy suit, but it was the calm in his expression, the certainty in his stride, that made people pause. All conversation died. Passengers watched, trying to guess who he was. Sierra's heart leapt into her throat. "Dead," she whispered. Not sure if she dared hope. Camille blinked in surprise, suddenly off balance. She stepped forward, putting on her brightest, most professional smile. "Welcome aboard Orion Air, sir. May I see your boarding pass?" Her voice was pleasant, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of nervousness. Nathaniel met her gaze without flinching. He handed her his first-class ticket, but never broke eye contact. "Thank you," he said, his voice calm but steely. His eyes drifted past Camille and found Sierra by the window. Her posture was rigid, her eyes wide with a storm of relief and anxiety. Nathaniel nodded to her, just a small gesture. but it was enough. Sierra exhaled the breath she'd been holding for hours. As Nathaniel made his way to her row, Camille stepped in his path. "Sir, please wait until the other passengers have boarded." He stopped. "Are you Camille Hawthorne?" She faltered. "Yes, sir. Is there a problem?" Nathaniel's tone was gentle, but the edge beneath it was unmistakable. "You're the lead flight attendant on this route." She nodded, eyes flickering nervously between him and Sierra. "Good. I'd like you to join me at my seat in a few minutes. There's something we need to discuss about your treatment of my daughter." Now every nearby passenger was listening, heads turned, phones quietly raised, whispers spreading like wildfire. The older couple from earlier leaned into the aisle. Julian Reyes started typing furiously. Lucille looked at Sierra, understanding at last. Camille's face turned pale, her composure cracking at the edges. "Your daughter," she echoed. Nathaniel's smile was razor-thin. "Sierra Langston, my daughter. You've met her." Camille swallowed hard, stepping aside to let him pass. Nathaniel sat beside Sierra, pulling her into a gentle embrace. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't need to. The strain on her face, the exhaustion in her posture, told him everything. "You were stronger than most adults would have been," he whispered, his hand warm and steady on her back. Sierra buried her face in his shoulder. Just for a second, all the composure she'd built during the flight began to melt, replaced by a flood of relief and quiet tears. Across the aisle, Lucille dabbed her eyes and offered a proud, approving nod. Julian Reyes caught every moment, sensing a turning point that was bigger than any business deal. The passengers were still buzzing, the cabin alive with energy and questions. Ray Mendoza quietly took his place near the galley, ready to witness whatever happened next. He texted a single line to Nathaniel's assistant. "He's on board." The game just changed. As the aircraft doors closed once more and the captain announced their imminent departure for Seattle, the energy in first class was transformed. For the first time, all flight. Sierra felt safe, but she also knew deep in her bones that the real storm was just about to begin. For the first few minutes after Nathaniel Langston sat down beside his daughter, an odd, suspended silence overtook the first-class cabin. Passengers who had whispered and watched from the corners of their eyes now looked on more openly, sensing a shift in the power dynamic. Even those who tried to act uninterested found themselves listening, the name Langston now echoing quietly in their minds. Sierra held her father's hand tightly. It was all she needed in that moment, a physical reminder that she was not alone, not invisible, not powerless. She tried to collect herself, wiping away the last of her tears as Nathaniel leaned in and whispered, "Whatever happened, I'm here now. No more carrying this by yourself." Across the aisle, Lucille Brenner leaned forward, her face soft with empathy. "Mr. Langston, your daughter has shown extraordinary composure. I hope you know what a remarkable young woman you're raising." Nathaniel gave a gentle smile, nodding in gratitude. Julian Reyes, still recording on his phone, caught the exchange. He knew this would be the moment people remembered. The moment the story turned from silent endurance to open confrontation. A few rows up, Camille Hawthorne stood frozen in the galley. Her mind raced through company policies, flight procedures, and the exact words she had used throughout the morning. Her hands shook as she set down a tray. She turned to Marla, her junior colleague, and whispered, "Did you know who she was? That she was Langston's daughter?" Marla shrugged, eyes wide. "I just did my job." "Camille." Camille swallowed hard. It wasn't enough now to say she'd followed the rules. She could feel the weight of every choice she'd made that day pressing in on her. A voice came over the intercom. "Miss Hawthorne, could you please report to First Class Row 1? It was the captain, clear and unmistakable. Passengers straightened, a few pulling out phones to film openly. Camille smoothed her uniform, drew a breath, and made her way forward, every step slow and deliberate. Nathaniel looked up as Camille arrived at his row. He stood, tall and unflinching. Sierra sat quietly, her gaze unwavering. "Ms. Hawthorne," Nathaniel began, his voice polite but edged with steel. "I'd like to discuss the service my daughter received on this flight. From what I've gathered, it was markedly different from what other passengers experienced." Camille opened her mouth, searching for the right words. "Sir, I apologize," if he held up a hand, silencing her gently. "Please don't apologize just yet. I'd like to hear your version of events. What, exactly, was your reason for questioning her ticket, for skipping her during service, for the comments about quotas and upgrades?" Camille's cheeks flushed. Passengers listened openly now. Even the captain peeked out of the cockpit to observe. "I was following standard protocol for unaccompanied minors in first class," Camille said, her words slow, careful. "We sometimes see fraudulent upgrades, and with the new corporate policies, there's been confusion." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed, but he remained composed. "And how did you determine that my daughter's ticket was suspect? Was it her age, or was it something else?" The question landed heavily. Camille looked down, flustered. "Sir, I never intended any offense." Nathaniel's tone grew even calmer, the kind of calm that left no room for excuses. "The reality is, Ms. Hawthorne, you made assumptions. You treated my daughter as if she didn't belong, even after her credentials were verified. That isn't protocol. That's personal bias." A murmur ran through the cabin. A few passengers nodded. Lucille spoke up, her voice strong and unwavering. "He's right. I watched you all morning. You treated her differently, and you know it." Julian Reyes lowered his phone for a moment and said, "The world is watching. Ms. Hawthorne, I'd suggest you tell the truth, not just for yourself, but for everyone who's ever been in Sierra's shoes." Camille's voice shook as she answered, "I see that now. I made a mistake. I should have treated her the same as any other passenger." Nathaniel nodded. "Thank you for your honesty. I trust there will be a formal review of this incident." Just then, the captain's voice came over the intercom again, a touch more formal than before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our final descent into Seattle. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival." Camille stepped back, her face pale, her composure shaken. She disappeared to the galley, leaving behind an air of discomfort that would not fade. Nathaniel turned back to Sierra. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She nodded, still processing the whirlwind of the last hour. "I am now. I just didn't want to make it worse for anyone. I just wanted to get to Auntie's house, to finish what I started." He squeezed her hand. "You did more than finish. You set a new beginning, for yourself and for everyone watching." Sierra closed her eyes, letting his words settle into her bones. For the first time since the plane left Houston, she allowed herself to believe she could breathe freely. The other passengers began to talk more openly now. Some came over to offer quiet words of support to Sierra. Lucille gave her a hug, whispering, You're a trailblazer, darling. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less. Julian Reyes handed Nathaniel a business card, his eyes bright. If you ever want to discuss real change, let's talk. My firm backs leadership that looks like the world we actually live in. And the world just saw what your daughter can do. Nathaniel smiled. Taking the card? Thank you. Julian, we'll be in touch. Outside, the city lights of Seattle twinkled in the early dusk, the skyline rising in the distance. Sierra gazed through the window, her heart still pounding, but lighter now, buoyed by something she hadn't expected to find a sense of pride not just in herself, but in everyone who had chosen to speak up. As the plane touched down, she realized the real journey was only beginning. Nathaniel helped her gather her things. Lucille, with her warm smile, said goodbye as she prepared to meet her son at baggage claim. Julian Reyes lingered in the aisle, typing furiously into his phone, and Camille, standing by the exit, looked lost in thought. Sierra stepped off the plane, her father at her side, and breathed in the cool Seattle air. Every step forward was a step into a future she had made a little more possible for herself and for those who would follow. The first-class cabin doors slid open, and passengers slowly filed into the bright corridor of Seattle-Tacoma International. The buzz in the air was different now, less about the minor inconvenience of a surprise stop, more about what had unfolded in the sky. Whispers and snippets of conversation echoed along the jet bridge. Sierra felt the difference, too, no longer shrinking into herself. She walked beside her father, her steps measured and sure. She kept her shoulders back. Nathaniel matched her pace, one hand gently at her back, more proud than protective now. Just ahead, Lucille Brenner turned and waited at the end of the jet bridge, her luggage rolling at her side. She gave Sierra one last reassuring smile and said, "You take care of yourself, young lady. I expect to read about you someday, but in much happier circumstances." They shared a brief, heartfelt hug. Passengers from coach and business class caught up, some pausing awkwardly as if wanting to say something. A few murmured kind words to Sierra or simply nodded in recognition, acknowledging what they had witnessed. Julian Reyes lingered nearby, tucking his phone away, clearly deep in thought. The main concourse was flooded with afternoon light, but unlike any normal arrival, a small group stood waiting near the gate. 3 Orion Air representatives, the Seattle station manager, a woman in a sharply tailored suit with a corporate badge, and a pair of security personnel. The mood was formal but tense. Nathaniel led Sierra toward the group. The woman in the tailored suit stepped forward, extending her hand. "Mr. Langston." "I'm Julia Park, Orion Air's Director of Customer Relations. We've been made aware of an incident on board. Would you and your daughter join us in the lounge for a brief conversation?" Nathaniel gave Sierra an encouraging nod. "Of course. I assume this is about the treatment of my daughter during the flight." Julia nodded, lowering her voice. "We've already received several messages from passengers, including video footage. I assure you, this will be taken seriously. If you prefer to wait for your legal counsel or address this more formally, we can arrange that as well." Nathaniel looked at Sierra, seeking her consent. Sierra hesitated, then spoke softly but clearly. "I'd like to talk now. I want my story heard while I can still feel it." Julia led them to a quiet corner of the executive lounge. Ray Mendoza followed at a discreet distance, standing guard near the entrance. Julian Ray slipped inside behind them, invited by a quiet nod from Nathaniel. Once seated, Julia offered water and a moment to settle. "Sierra, I want to hear in your own words what happened today. Please don't spare any details." Sierra steadied herself. She told the story from the beginning, her voice wavering only at the memory of Camille's remarks at the boarding gate, and again at the moment she felt invisible in her seat. Nathaniel didn't interrupt. He listened, eyes steady and proud. Julia took notes, her expression grave. When Sierra finished, she set her pen down. "I'm deeply sorry for what you experienced. I know words aren't enough, but I promise you this will not be swept aside. We've already suspended Ms. Hawthorne from flight duties pending an internal review. There will be a transparent investigation, and we'll keep your family updated at every stage." Julian Reyes, unable to contain himself, spoke up. "If I may, I recorded several incidents from my seat and would be happy to provide them. I think the public deserves to know how these things really happen. Maybe it's time to rethink what first-class service means." Julia met his gaze, neither defensive nor dismissive. "We want to be leaders, not just followers, in this industry. I can't undo what happened, but I hope we can turn it into something constructive." Nathaniel gave her a measured nod. "We don't want this to be a witch hunt. We want to see real change, training, accountability, a system where passengers, especially young ones, especially black girls, are never made to feel they don't belong." Sierra felt a warmth in her chest. For the first time since leaving Houston, she believed her voice might spark more than sympathy. It might help create something new. Outside the lounge, passengers streamed through the terminal, but news was already spreading. Videos and photos had surfaced online, shared with hashtags like Orion Air Incident and Echo Flying While Black. Comments poured in from around the country, stories of microaggressions in airports, memories of being doubted and delayed, and words of support for Sierra's strength. Lucille, waiting for her ride, spotted a young woman interviewing people for a local news station. She marched up, her teaching instincts kicking in. "I have something to say about what I witnessed today," she declared. "It's time airlines learned to see every passenger." Meanwhile, in the lounge, Julia outlined the next steps. "We'll offer a formal apology. Our executive team will be reviewing diversity and anti-bias protocols, not just for flight crews, but across all departments. Sierra, if you're willing, we'd like you to speak with our employee trainers. Your story could help change how we prepare staff." Sierra felt her nerves swirl, but nodded. "I want to help. I want other girls, other kids to know they can speak up, too." Nathaniel put an arm around her shoulders. "We'll support you. And Julia, I expect Orion Air to become the industry standard for equity, not just another headline." After the meeting, as they walked back into the main concourse, Sierra checked her phone. Dozens of messages from friends, even a few classmates she barely knew. The story was everywhere already. She felt exposed, but also emboldened. Ray Mendoza caught up, nodding to Nathaniel. "It's handled for now, sir. The company is moving quickly." Nathaniel shook his hand. "Thank you. Ray, you were her shield when she needed it." Julian Reyes lingered a moment, then said, "If you ever need an advocate for change, you know where to find me. Sierra, you're the bravest person on this plane." Sierra smiled shyly. "Thank you for not staying silent." As they headed out into the terminal, the noise of daily life resumed, travelers hurrying, announcements echoing, the smell of coffee and jet fuel blending in the air. But for Sierra, everything felt different. She moved with a new awareness, not just of herself, but of the quiet power that comes from being seen, believed, and supported. Sometimes, she thought, the biggest changes don't happen at 30,000 feet. They happen when you step into the world, unafraid, carrying your story into the light. Sierra and Nathaniel walked together through the bustling terminal, each step away from the gate bringing a new kind of clarity. Their faces, especially Sierra's, were already appearing in social media posts, texted news blurbs, and video clips. The entire flight felt suspended between two worlds, one where things were swept under the rug, and one where nothing could ever be hidden again. As they made their way to baggage claim, Nathaniel's phone buzzed incessantly. He checked messages from legal, PR, even the CEO of another major airline who sent a note reading, "Whatever you do next, the whole industry is watching." It made Nathaniel smile. Just a little. He glanced at Sierra. "You realize what happened up there is already starting something big. Are you ready for that?" Sierra hesitated. The idea of thousands of strangers knowing her story made her nervous, but she remembered how she'd felt on that flight, small, silent, and alone. She never wanted anyone else to feel that way. If it helps even one person feel braver. "I'm ready," she said softly. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the terminal, Camille Hawthorne sat with her head in her hands, her uniform rumpled, eyes red from tears. Her phone buzzed, too, but she ignored it. The airline's HR had already called her in for an immediate review. She thought about her actions again and again, every moment on the flight, every time she'd looked through Sierra instead of at her. For the first time in years, Camille found herself questioning not only her behavior, but her own heart. A few feet away, Lucille Brenner was giving an impromptu interview to a local news station, her clear voice carrying across the terminal. "I watched that young woman get treated as less than from the minute she stepped on board," Lucille declared. "That's not how we do things in this country. Or at least, it's not how we should. Change starts with us speaking up. Every single time." Clips of her words would soon join Sierra's story online, lending both gravity and generational wisdom to the unfolding saga. Upstairs in the corporate suites of Orion Air, Julia Park assembled her crisis response team. "We have a choice," she told them, "to lead or to follow. We're going to be the airline that sets the standard not because we have to, but because we should." As the hours passed, the story picked up momentum. Hashtags like "Just Dignity in the Skies," "Sierra Speaks," and "Durham First Class Justice" climbed Twitter's trending topics. Journalists reached out from everywhere. Good Morning America, CNN, the Seattle Times. Even competitors in the travel industry commented publicly, some offering words of solidarity, others issuing their own zero-tolerance statements, determined not to be caught unprepared. At the hotel later that night, Sierra sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through comments on her story. Most were supportive, but a few were dismissive, some openly cruel. She felt a sting of old pain return, a reminder that not everyone wanted to see change. She wondered how her father had endured years of these battles in boardrooms and back offices. Nathaniel knocked softly at her door. "Can I come in?" She nodded. He sat beside her, seeing the tension in her shoulders. "You can't control what everyone says," he told her, "but you control your story now. Don't let their bitterness become your burden." Sierra leaned into him, grateful. "What if I'm not strong enough for this?" she whispered. He smiled. "You already were. You just didn't know until today." While Sierra tried to sleep, the world outside kept moving. Julian Reyes was interviewed by a major news outlet. This wasn't just a one-off. He explained, it's part of a pattern. What made it different was that people saw it, recorded it, and then someone with power cared enough to show up in person. That's what changes the narrative. On the other side of Seattle, Camille lay awake in her apartment, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through memories of her own childhood, times she'd been excluded for being different. She wondered if she had somehow become the very thing she'd spent years resenting. Her phone rang. It was her teenage daughter, voice trembling with confusion. "Mom, is what I saw online." True, Camille's throat tightened as she realized that this moment, too, would define her not just as a flight attendant, but as a mother. The next morning, Sierra was up early, too wired to eat breakfast. Downstairs, Julia Park waited with a small team and a legal advisor. "We want to meet with you and your father," Julia said gently, "and invite you to help us build something new." The meeting took place in a bright conference room, windows looking out over the city. Julia began. "Sierra, your experience exposed a weakness in our company culture, but you also gave us an opportunity. Would you be willing to consult with us as we rewrite our training for staff onboarding, bias recognition, dignity for every passenger?" Nathaniel beamed, proud but letting Sierra answer for herself. "I want to help," Sierra said, "but not just for Orion Air, for every airline, every kid who ever flies." Julia nodded. "That's exactly what we hope to accomplish." A week later, the airline announced sweeping changes, a full review of staff training, new anti-bias workshops, an independent passenger advocacy council with real authority, and, most notably, an official partnership with Sierra to co-develop a passenger dignity initiative. Other airlines soon reached out, asking to collaborate, and the story spread far beyond Seattle or Houston. Sierra, now balancing schoolwork and new responsibility, gave her first public statement with her father at her side. "What happened to me isn't unique," she told reporters. "But what comes next? Real accountability, education, listening. That's how we make sure no one else ever has to feel invisible again. Every seat on a plane should come with the same dignity, whether you're in row 1 or row 30. The applause was real, spontaneous, from people who saw in Sierra not just a passenger, but a catalyst. As her words echoed through newsrooms, boardrooms, and classrooms across the country, Sierra realized the power of her own story. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was shared, and because it proved that ordinary moments of courage could move an entire industry. And though she still struggled with nerves and self-doubt, Sierra stood taller every day, understanding at last what it meant to belong not just to a seat or a flight, but to a movement. The weeks that followed Sierra's flight felt like a whirlwind, a blur of interviews, meetings, and difficult conversations. Every day brought a new wave of attention. News crews parked outside the Langston home. School administrators called to offer support. And even strangers sent letters, emails, and artwork, most of them expressing pride and hope. Some, though, were angry or skeptical, reminding Sierra how fragile public goodwill could be. Nathaniel kept a steady hand through it all, protecting Sierra's time, reminding her to breathe, to be a teenager, to let the world turn without her for a few hours each day. Still, he saw the change in her. She was more thoughtful, more mature, sometimes more tired. He wondered how much weight she should have to carry. Meanwhile, at Orion Air headquarters, Julia Park led daily updates on the Passenger Dignity Initiative. There were listening sessions with staff, meetings with civil rights groups, video calls with passengers who had similar stories. For the first time, Sierra realized how many people had felt just like she had ignored, questioned, made to feel like an outsider, even when they had done everything right. It was at one of these listening sessions, in a bright room lined with windows, that Sierra met people whose voices echoed her own. There was a young black flight attendant who described years of subtle exclusion from her own team. There was a family from Denver whose son had been mistaken for someone else and nearly removed from a flight. Each story made Sierra both sad and strangely hopeful. She saw that change, while slow and painful, was possible if people refused to stay silent. One afternoon, as Sierra waited for a meeting to begin, Camille Hawthorne walked quietly into the room. She looked smaller out of uniform, her hair pulled back and her posture uncertain. For a moment, the room stilled. Sierra's heart thudded. She didn't know what she wanted: an apology, an explanation, or just a sign that Camille had changed. Camille cleared her throat. "I'm not here as a flight attendant," she said. "I'm here because I've been asked to help rewrite our training, to share what I did wrong so others don't repeat it. I've learned a lot in these last few weeks, most of it the hard way. I'm sorry, Sierra. I can't change what I did, but I'm listening now." The words weren't perfect, but they were honest. Sierra nodded, her anger softened by the humility she saw in Camille's eyes. "Thank you," Sierra said. "What matters is that you're here, and that you mean it." As the program rolled out across Orion Air, the effect was immediate and public. Videos were posted online. Sierra talking about her experience, employees reflecting on their own growth, even Nathaniel joining a panel on equity in the travel industry. Other airlines sent observers to Orion's trainings. Some offered to implement the Passenger Dignity Initiative, wanting to avoid their own scandals, but also, for the first time, genuinely committed to change. Yet behind the scenes, the work was exhausting. Sierra struggled with self-doubt. Did people only want her story because of the controversy? Would they keep listening when the headlines faded? She journaled every night, trying to make sense of her new role. She missed her old routines, weekends at the park, afternoons with her best friend, family dinners without constant phone calls. One Friday evening, as rain streaked the windows of their home, Sierra and Nathaniel sat together on the couch, watching a news segment about another airline implementing the Dignity Initiative. Nathaniel smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "This all started because you didn't shrink away. Sierra, that's how change happens. Ordinary people standing up in extraordinary moments." Sierra let herself lean against his shoulder. "Do you ever worry it won't last? That things will just go back to how they were?" He paused, thinking carefully. "I worry. Change is never a straight line. But you made a crack in something that needed to break. Even if the world isn't perfect tomorrow, it's better because of you. And every kid who sees your story will know they aren't alone." The doorbell rang. Lucille Brenner had come by with a gift, a battered first edition of Maya Angelou's "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings." Inside the cover, she had written, "For Sierra, who proved that courage is the first seat in first class. With love, Lucille." Sierra's eyes filled with tears as she hugged Lucille. "You were my anchor," she whispered. "Thank you for standing up." Lucille chuckled. "I was just doing what my teachers did for me. The real work was yours, elsewhere." Camille spent long evenings reviewing old training manuals, working side by side with Sierra and other employees to make them more honest, more empathetic, less likely to hide prejudice behind protocol. She spoke with other flight attendants, admitting her mistakes, urging them to speak up when they saw something wrong. Some pushed back, but more were grateful for the honesty. And in the world outside, the conversation kept growing. The Passenger Dignity Initiative was discussed on podcasts, written about in think pieces. debated on radio shows. Civil rights leaders cited Sierra's case as proof that injustice was still woven through even the most polished spaces. A classmate of Sierra's gave a presentation about her story in English class, prompting a spirited debate that made even skeptical teachers think twice about their own unconscious assumptions. Sierra didn't know if she would ever get used to the attention, but slowly, she began to feel proud rather than overwhelmed. When she spoke at a community center in Seattle, telling her story to a group of teens who looked at her with wide eyes, she understood at last why her father had fought so hard, why Lucille had spoken up, why Camille's apology mattered. She realized the story was bigger than her, now part of a new fabric being woven, one strong enough to carry many more voices. One night, as Sierra sat on her porch under a velvet sky, she allowed herself a rare moment of peace. She realized that while headlines fade and companies move on, the courage to speak, to listen, and to change was what would remain. She thought of all the kids who would sit in first class after her, who would walk down jet bridges feeling like they belonged. That, she decided, was enough. 6 months after that fateful flight, Orion Air hosted a formal launch of the Passenger Dignity Initiative. The event took place in a spacious hangar at the company's headquarters in Houston. Planes glinted under soft lights, and banners reading "Every seat deserves dignity" lined the walls. Sierra stood backstage, smoothing her blazer and practicing her opening lines under her breath. She looked more grown up now. The wide-eyed nervousness of her first solo flight had been replaced by a calm confidence. Her braided gold bracelet still caught the light on her wrist. Below it, she could feel the scar of every moment she'd endured and every choice she'd made. Nathaniel Langston appeared beside her, offering a reassuring smile. "Ready," he whispered. Sierra nodded. "Ready." Her heart still fluttered, but she welcomed the feeling. It reminded her she was alive, that she had something to say. The MC introduced her, and Sierra walked to the lectern. Across the room, Julia Park, Lucille Brenner, Julian Reyes, Marla, and even Camille Hawthorne sat among a packed audience of employees, industry leaders, civil rights advocates, and journalists. The applause was warm but respectful as she began. "Good morning," she said, voice clear and steady. "My name is Sierra Langston. 6 months ago, I sat in seat 2A on a flight from Houston to Seattle and experienced something I never expected. I was questioned, ignored, and made to feel I didn't belong. But today, I'm here to share how that moment became a turning point, not just for me, but for an entire airline." She paused, glancing at her father, then out at the crowd. She felt the weight of their attention, but also their support. "When I first sat down in 2A, I tried to stay silent. I thought proving myself would be enough. But I learned that silence can hide harm. Speaking up can create change. Thanks to the courageous passengers who spoke out and the leaders who listened, people like Lucille Brenner, who offered me a hot towel and a voice, Julian Reyes, who recorded the truth and refused to look away, and my father, Nathaniel, who boarded that flight not as a CEO but as a dad determined to protect his daughter, we have the opportunity to transform an industry." The audience nodded, some dabbing at tears, others leaning forward in their seats. Sierra continued, "Orion Air's Passenger Dignity Initiative includes mandatory anti-bias training, clear reporting protocols, and an independent oversight council. But the heart of this initiative is personal. It's about seeing each person's humanity, starting with the person beside you." She tapped her chest lightly. "Just like I was seen, validated, and protected." She told a brief anecdote about Lucille's gift of Maya Angelou's book and how that first meal in seat 2A, shared with kindness, changed everything. She spoke of Camille Hawthorne's honesty in admitting her mistakes and her commitment to help train future employees. She mentioned Marla's gentle kindness, Ray Mendoza's steadfast watchfulness, and Julia Park's determination to lead with empathy. When she finished, the silence held for a moment before applause erupted. It grew into a standing ovation. After the ceremony, Julia Park took the stage. Thanks to Sierra's courage, we've already trained over 5,000 employees. We're launching mentorship programs for young students interested in aviation careers and partnering with civil rights organizations to ensure lasting accountability. She gestured to Sierra, and she'll continue to guide us every step of the way. Over the next hours, guests mingled among the planes. Sierra found Lucille, who pressed the first edition Angelo book into her hands once more. "Keep telling your story," Lucille said. "Seat 2O belongs to every child who needs to know they deserve the best." Julian Reyes approached with a folder. "Our firm is committing a fund to support minority entrepreneurs in aviation," he said. "Consider this our way of saying we believe in your vision." Sierra's eyes brightened. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Nearby, Camille Hawthorne navigated the crowd, looking both nervous and hopeful. She approached Sierra with a small box. "I wanted you to have this," she said softly. Sierra opened it to find a delicate pin shaped like an airplane wing, engraved with the words, "Dignity takes flight." "For you," Camille added, "to remind you that every flight deserves care." Sierra accepted the gift, sensing real humility and a promise of change in Camille's gesture. As evening light faded to twilight, Nathaniel found Sierra on the tarmac near the gleaming planes. "You did it," he said quietly. "You turned one moment of pain into a legacy that will outlast both of us." Sierra leaned against him, gazing up at the metal birds ready for departure. "I guess seat 2A will never feel the same," she said with a small laugh. He smiled. "No, it'll feel like history." In the days that followed, stories of seat 2A spread beyond aviation circles into schools, community centers, and boardrooms. Sierra received invitations to testify before local councils, speak at conferences, and mentor young people. She balanced it all with school friends and family dinners, learning that doing important work didn't erase her need for normal teenage moments. On a quiet Sunday morning, Sierra sat at her desk, writing in her journal. She paused to look at a photo of the gates of the first-class cabin, the moment Camille scanned her pass, the shadow on her face. She closed her eyes and whispered a thank you to every person who had refused to stay silent. Her phone buzzed with a message from her best friend movie night. Sierra smiled and typed back, "See you at 7." She closed her journal and headed downstairs, her heart full. The world was still imperfect, but she knew now that one voice could make a difference. One seat could become a symbol, and one girl, with the right support, could help an entire industry remember the simple truth everyone deserves to fly with dignity. Sierra Langston's story reminds us that courage can take flight in the face of prejudice, transforming pain into lasting change. From the tender kindness of a fellow passenger to the decisive action of a father in the cockpit, every act of solidarity helped turn a moment of injustice into a movement for dignity. We honor Sierra's strength and condemn the bias that tried to silence her. If this story moved you, give us a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful true tales that challenge us to stand up for what is right. Stay tuned. Our next video will take you even deeper into stories of resilience and hope.